Imagine a life where chaos surrounds you, where the very foundations of your world tremble, yet your mind remains as still as a mirrored lake. The ancient Stoics knew a secret. True peace is not the absence of storms, but the absolute mastery of your own ship. Today, we reveal 7 profound Stoic truths that shatter modern illusions and rebuild your reality from the ground up. Once you internalize them, the heavy burdens you carry will vanish, and finally, everything will fall perfectly into place. In the ancient city of Athens there lived a master archer. He was renowned throughout the Mediterranean for his peerless precision. He spent decades conditioning his body, sharpening his eyesight, and perfecting the craftsmanship of his bows. Every morning, he would test the tension of the wood, the fletching of his arrows, and the steadiness of his breath. One afternoon, a young student approached him and asked, "Master, how is it that you never seem angry when you miss the target?" The master archer smiled, taking an arrow from his quiver. He knocked it to the string, drew it back to his cheek, and took careful aim at a wooden post far across the courtyard. He released the string. The arrow flew true, slicing through the air with deadly speed. But just before it reached the target, a sudden, violent gust of wind swept across the courtyard, knocking the arrow off its path. It embedded itself uselessly in the dirt. The student gasped, waiting for the master's frustration. Instead, the archer simply lowered his bow and said, "I did everything within my power. I strung the bow perfectly. I controlled my breath. I aimed with precision. The moment the arrow left my fingertips, it was no longer mine. It belonged to the wind. Why should I curse the wind for being the wind?" This story encapsulates the very foundation of Stoic philosophy, what the slave-turned-philosopher Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. Epictetus opened his famous manual, the Enchiridion, with a single, earth-shattering statement. "Some things are within our power, while others are not." It sounds so remarkably simple, almost too obvious to be considered profound. Yet, humanity's greatest suffering stems entirely from forgetting this single truth. We live our lives under a grand illusion of control. We believe that if we just worry enough, plan enough, or manipulate our surroundings enough, we can dictate the outcomes of our lives. We tie our happiness to the weather, the fluctuating economy, the traffic on our morning commute, and most dangerously, the opinions and actions of other people. We cast our arrows into the wind and then scream at the sky when they are blown off course. The first Stoic truth demands a radical drawing of boundaries. You must take an honest inventory of your life and draw a stark, impenetrable line between what is yours and what is not. What is within your power? Your thoughts, your beliefs, your impulses, your choices, and your actions. That is your kingdom. It is a small kingdom, but you are its absolute ruler. What is not within your power? Everything else. Your body's eventual aging, your reputation, your wealth, the stock market, the past, the future, and the behavior of everyone around you. These things belong to the wind. When you fail to recognize this boundary, you leak your vital energy into a bottomless void. Think of the last time you sat in gridlocked traffic, gripping the steering wheel until your knuckles turned white, your heart rate spiking, cursing the cars in front of you. What did that anger accomplish? Did it part the sea of vehicles? Did it make the traffic move even 1 second faster? No. The traffic remained exactly as it was. The only thing that changed was you. You poisoned your own mind, you ruined your own morning, and you surrendered your inner peace to an external event that didn't even notice you were angry. When you truly understand the dichotomy of control, everything begins to fall into place, because the crushing weight of the world is lifted from your shoulders. You stop trying to manage the universe. You realize that it is not your job to make people like you. It is only your job to be honorable and kind. It is not your job to guarantee that your business succeeds. It is only your job to work diligently, strategize intelligently, and act with integrity. The Stoic does not become passive. This is a common misunderstanding of the philosophy. Stoicism is not about giving up or becoming a doormat for fate. The archer still aims. The archer still practices. The archer still desires to hit the target. The difference lies in where the archer's sense of self-worth and peace is rooted. The modern man attaches his peace to the target. If he hits it, he is happy. If he misses, he is devastated. The Stoic attaches his peace to the effort. The Stoic finds absolute satisfaction in knowing he drew the bow correctly. The outcome is delegated to the universe. When the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius sat in his tent on the front lines of the Germanic wars, surrounded by plague, betrayal, and the immense pressure of ruling the known world, he did not write in his journal about how unfair his situation was. He wrote to remind himself of what he could control. He knew that even as an emperor, he could not control the winter snows, he could not control the loyalty of every general, and he could not control the plague that was ravaging his armies. But he could control his own virtue, his own patience, and his own duty to his people. To practice this first truth, you must become ruthlessly strict with your own attention. Whenever you feel anxiety rising in your chest, whenever you feel the heat of anger flushing your face, stop immediately. Ask yourself the ultimate Stoic question. Is this up to me? If a colleague insults you, is their mouth up to you? No, their words belong to them. What is up to you is your reaction. You can choose to smile, walk away, and let their malice belong entirely to them. If the economy crashes and you lose your savings, is the global market up to you? No. What is up to you is how you adapt, how you budget, and how you maintain your character in the face of financial ruin. This truth is a chisel. You use it to chip away all the unnecessary attachments that cause you misery. As you chip them away, what remains is an unshakable core. You become a fortress. The wind will howl, the rain will lash against the stone. The world will do what the world does. But inside the fortress, the fire burns bright. The air is calm, and you are utterly at peace. You realize that you cannot control the plot of the play you are acting in. But you have absolute power over how beautifully you play your assigned role. In the bustling port city of Ostia, the gateway to ancient Rome, there lived a wealthy merchant named Cassius. Cassius had invested his entire fortune in a fleet of ships carrying precious silks and spices from the east. For months, he waited for their return. One evening, a sailor arrived at the local tavern with a terrifying rumor. A massive storm had destroyed a Roman merchant fleet off the coast of Alexandria. Upon hearing this, Cassius lost his mind. For 3 days and 3 nights, he paced the marble floors of his villa. He could not eat. He could not sleep. His heart palpitated constantly. His breathing was shallow, and his face aged 10 years in a matter of hours. He screamed at his servants, alienated his wife, and wept over his impending financial ruin. He vividly imagined himself forced into beggary, his family disgraced, wandering the streets of Rome in rags. He suffered every agony of poverty and failure. On the 4th morning, he walked down to the docks to surrender to his miserable fate. As he looked out at the horizon, he saw sails. The banners of his family crest fluttered in the wind. His fleet had arrived. fully intact, heavily laden with cargo. The sunken ships belonged to a rival from another province. Cassius was richer than he had ever been. Yet, looking at Cassius, you would see a broken man. He was physically exhausted, emotionally drained, and spiritually hollowed out. He had suffered the absolute torment of ruin without ever actually being ruined. This brings us to the second, profound Stoic truth, brilliantly articulated by the statesman and philosopher Seneca. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Look at your own life. How many disasters have you lived through in your mind that never actually came to pass? How many imaginary arguments have you had in the shower with a boss or a partner, spiking your adrenaline, ruining your mood, over words that were never even spoken? How many nights have you stared at the ceiling, gripped by the terror of a financial collapse, a health crisis, or a social humiliation that existed nowhere except in the theater of your own mind? The human brain is an evolutionary marvel, designed to keep us alive by anticipating danger. But in the modern world, this survival mechanism has become our greatest torturer. Our minds are master storytellers, but they are deeply obsessed with tragedy. They project shadows onto the wall of our consciousness, and we, like frightened children in the dark, cower before them, forgetting that we are the ones holding the lantern. The Stoics understood that objective reality is, for the most part, highly manageable. It is our perception of reality that destroys us. Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb people, but their judgments about those events. Imagine two men standing in the pouring rain. The first man looks up, curses the sky, shivers in anger, and thinks, "This is miserable. My day is ruined. The universe is always working against me." He experiences deep psychological suffering. The second man looks up, feels the cold water on his skin, and thinks, "It is raining." He experiences no suffering, only wetness. The event, the rain, is entirely neutral. Water falling from the sky has no inherent malice or agenda. The suffering of the first man was entirely self-created. He added an emotional narrative to a neutral physical fact. This is what the Stoics called phantasia, or impressions. Throughout the day, the world presents us with impressions. My partner hasn't texted me back in 3 hours. That is the objective impression. But instantly, our untrained minds rush in with the judgment. They are angry with me. They are losing interest. The relationship is failing. Suddenly, you are in a state of intense suffering. The second truth requires you to master the discipline of assent. You are the bouncer at the door of your own mind. When a terrifying thought or an anxious judgment knocks on the door, you do not have to let it in. You do not have to give it your assent. You can stop and say, you are just an impression, and not at all the thing you claim to represent. To let everything fall into place, you must learn to strip the adjectives and the catastrophizing away from your life. You must practice speaking to yourself in the strictest terms of objective reality. You didn't fail miserably and ruin your career. You did not get the promotion. You aren't destined to be alone forever because no one will ever love you. You went on a date that didn't work out. You aren't in a state of unbearable, endless agony. You have a sharp pain in your knee right now. When you strip away the story, the problem shrinks to its actual, manageable size. Reality is almost always bearable. It is the imagined future and the regretted past that crush us. Seneca urged his friend Lucilius to stop anticipating trouble. What I advise you to do is not to be unhappy before the crisis comes. since it may be that the dangers before which you paled as if they were threatening you will never come upon you. They certainly have not yet come. By constantly agonizing over the future, you are paying interest on a debt you may not even owe. And even worse, by suffering in imagination, you drain the exact energy and clarity you need to actually deal with reality when it does arrive. The Stoic trains themselves to return, constantly, to the present moment. The past is a memory, a ghost. The future is an illusion, a mist. The only place where reality exists, the only place where you have any power, is right here, right now, in this very second. And in this exact second, are you okay? If you are sitting here, breathing, reading, or listening to these words, you are safe. The catastrophe has not happened. When you internalize this second truth, your mental landscape transforms. You realize that a vast majority of your pain was a self-inflicted hallucination. You stop fighting phantoms. You stop shadow boxing with the worst-case scenarios. You realize that you have the strength to handle whatever objective reality throws at you, as long as you don't magnify it with the lens of your own fear. Everything falls into place, because your mind finally becomes your ally, rather than your tormentor. You realize that peace was never about manipulating the external world to be perfectly safe. It was always about realizing that the world inside your mind is the only place you ever truly live, and you possess the sole power to dictate its weather. In the late 4th century BC, a Phoenician merchant named Zeno set sail across the Mediterranean. The hull of his ship was packed to the brim with Tyrian purple dye. In the ancient world, this dye, extracted drop by drop from sea snails, was worth more than its weight in gold. It was the color of kings, emperors, and gods. Zeno's entire fortune, the culmination of his family's generational wealth and his own life's labor, was resting in the wooden belly of that ship. Midway through the journey, the sky bruised into a vicious purple, mirroring the cargo below. A sudden, violent squall descended upon the sea. The waves rose like jagged mountains, lifting the wooden vessel and smashing it down until the timber splintered. As the ship broke apart, Zeno was thrown into the freezing, turbulent waters. He clung to a piece of driftwood, coughing up seawater, watching helplessly as the heavy barrels of dye sank into the abyss. His fortune was swallowed by the sea. Zeno washed ashore in Piraeus, the port of Athens, a ruined man. He had no money, no ships, no status, and no home. He wandered the dusty streets of Athens, his clothes stiff with dried salt, a ghost of his former self. Seeking distraction from his overwhelming despair, he wandered into a bookseller's shop and began reading a manuscript about the life of Socrates. Mesmerized by the profound peace and unshakable character of the Athenian philosopher, Zeno turned to the bookseller and asked, "Where can I find a man like this today?" The bookseller pointed out the window to a passing Cynic philosopher named Crates. Zeno followed him. He abandoned his identity as a merchant, threw himself into the study of philosophy, and eventually began teaching his own ideas on the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch in Athens. Those teachings became the foundation of Stoicism. Years later, reflecting on the catastrophic storm that had destroyed his life, Zeno famously declared, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." This brings us to the third Stoic truth, an idea so powerful it borders on alchemy: amor fati, or the love of one's fate. The first Stoic truth taught us to accept what we cannot control. The second taught us not to suffer in imagination over it. But amor fati demands a radical step further. It asks us not merely to accept our circumstances, not merely to tolerate them with a stiff upper lip, but to passionately embrace them. It is the practice of looking at every event in your life, every failure, every rejection, every disease, every heartbreak, and saying, "This is exactly what I needed." Human nature is wired for comfort. When something goes wrong, our immediate instinct is resistance. We whine, we complain, we bargain with reality. Why is this happening to me? This isn't fair. If only this hadn't occurred, I would be happy. We spend vast amounts of emotional energy trying to mentally rewrite the past, wishing the universe had dealt us a different hand of cards. But wishing reality were different is a war you will always lose, and the casualty is your own peace of mind. The Stoic views reality through a completely different lens. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journals, utilized a brilliant metaphor. He noted that when a small, fragile candle is exposed to a strong gust of wind, it is blown out. The wind is the enemy of the candle. But when a raging, blazing bonfire is exposed to the exact same gust of wind, something magnificent happens. The fire consumes the wind. It uses the oxygen to burn hotter, brighter, and fiercer. The obstacle becomes the fuel. The impediment to action advances action, Marcus wrote. What stands in the way becomes the way. If you truly want everything to fall into place, you must stop being the candle and start being the fire. You must realize that the universe is not punishing you. It is forging you. It is providing you with the exact raw material you need to build your character. Imagine you are passed over for a promotion you desperately wanted. The candle mindset says, "I am a failure. My boss hates me. My career is ruined." The fire mindset, amor fati, looks at the rejection and says, "Good. This promotion would have kept me comfortable. Now I am hungry again. Now I have the opportunity to practice resilience, to identify the flaws in my work, or perhaps to finally leave this company and start the business I have always dreamed of." Imagine you are stuck in an airport because your flight is delayed for 6 hours. You can throw a tantrum at the gate agent, spike your blood pressure, and pace the terminal in misery. Or you can smile and say, "Good. I have been given the unexpected gift of 6 hours. I can finally read that book I brought. I can practice patience, or I can simply sit in silence and observe humanity." This is not a delusion. It is not toxic positivity, where you pretend bad things don't hurt. A shipwreck still ruins you financially. A breakup still breaks your heart. A disease still ravages the body. Stoicism does not ask you to suppress your grief, but it asks you to recognize that within the ashes of your tragedy lies the seed of a profound transformation. Without the shipwreck, there is no Zeno the philosopher. Without the treacherous betrayal of his generals, there is no Marcus Aurelius the Stoic emperor. Without the brutal exile to Corsica, there is no Seneca, the master of wisdom. Every situation you encounter has two handles. One handle is named misery, and the other is named advantage. You have the absolute freedom to choose which handle you grab. When someone insults you, grab the handle of advantage. They are giving you a free opportunity to practice emotional restraint. When you fall ill, grab the handle of advantage. Your body is forcing you to rest and reminding you of the preciousness of health. When you internalize amor fati, fear loses its grip on your soul. What is there left to fear? If you succeed, you will use it to be generous and just. If you fail, you will use it to build resilience and wisdom. When you become the fire, nothing can extinguish you. The very things designed to destroy you will only make you burn brighter. You stop asking the universe for an easy life, and instead you thank it for the strength to endure a difficult one. You realize that your life is a perfect, intricate tapestry, and even the darkest, most painful threads were absolutely necessary to complete the masterpiece. In the twilight years of the Roman Republic, there was a fiercely wealthy patrician named Lucius. He owned vast estates across the Italian countryside, hundreds of slaves, and enough gold to fund an army. Yet, Lucius was a man constantly stressed, constantly rushing, and perpetually dissatisfied. He was always looking toward the horizon. He would tell his friends, "When I reach my 60th year, I will finally step down from the Senate. I will retire to my villa by the sea. I will read the Greek poets. I will enjoy the company of my wife. And I will finally savor the fruits of my labor. My real life will begin at 60. For 40 years, Lucius sacrificed his present moment at the altar of his future. He neglected his children as they grew, dismissing them with a wave of his hand, promising he would have time for them later. He ignored his health, pushing his body to the brink to secure just one more land deal. He suffered through grueling, treacherous political alliances, tolerating people he despised, all to secure his retirement. On the eve of his 60th birthday, the grand villa by the sea was finally completed. The marble floors were polished, the libraries were stocked with scrolls, and the gardens were blooming. That night, a grand feast was prepared to celebrate the beginning of Lucius's real life. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lucius felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest. He collapsed onto the newly laid marble floor. Before the physicians could arrive, his heart stopped. He had traded his entire existence for a tomorrow that never came. He died having never truly lived. This tragic tale brings us to the fourth, and perhaps most vital, Stoic truth. Memento mori. Remember that you must die. In modern society, death is a sanitized, taboo subject. We hide our dying in hospitals. We inject our corpses with chemicals to mimic the flush of life, and we actively avoid thinking about our own mortality. We treat death as a distant rumor, an unfortunate anomaly that happens to other people, but surely not to us. Not today. This mass delusion is the root of our greatest miscalculation, the squandering of time. Seneca addressed this profound tragedy in his masterpiece, On the Shortness of Life. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last, by death's final constraint, to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. Look at how you spend your days. We protect our money with heavy vaults, passwords, and lawyers. If a stranger walked up to you and stole $100 from your wallet, you would be furious. You would call the police. You would demand justice. Yet we allow people to steal hours, days, and weeks of our time, and we offer it up willingly. We allow a petty argument with a stranger on the internet to consume an entire evening. We allow the toxic behavior of a co-worker to rent space in our heads for years. We spend hours scrolling mindlessly through the digital lives of people we do not know, numbing ourselves in a glowing trance. We hold grudges against our family members, refusing to speak to them, assuming we have decades left to eventually make amends. We are frugal with our wealth, but recklessly profligate with our time, which is the only truly non-renewable resource in the universe. You can always make another dollar. You cannot manufacture another second. The Stoic does not meditate on death to become morbid or depressed. On the contrary, memento mori is the ultimate tool for liberation. It is the sharpest blade in the philosophical toolkit, used to violently cut away the trivialities that choke our existence. When you wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and remind yourself of an absolute biological fact. You are dying. The sand in your hourglass is falling. The breath in your lungs is numbered. You are not guaranteed this evening. You are not guaranteed your retirement. You are not guaranteed the time to apologize later. The Roman generals returning from victory were given grand parades, but a slave stood behind them on the chariot, holding a laurel crown over the general's head, whispering constantly, "Respice post te, hominem te memento mori." Look behind you. Remember you are a man. Remember you must die. This was not to ruin the celebration, but to ground the general in reality, preventing hubris and ensuring he savored the fleeting glory of the present. Imagine how your behavior would change today if you truly internalized this truth. If you knew this was the last time you would ever drink a cup of coffee, how would it taste? You wouldn't gulp it down while checking your emails. You would feel the warmth of the ceramic mug, you would inhale the roasted aroma, and you would savor the bitter, rich flavor on your tongue. It would become a sacred experience. If you knew this was the last time you would ever kiss your partner goodbye before work, would you do it distractedly while looking for your car keys? Or would you stop, look them deeply in the eyes, and feel the profound weight of your love for them? If you knew that you might not wake up tomorrow, would you really spend tonight composing a bitter email to a colleague who slighted you? Would it matter? The petty grievances, the bruised egos, the desire for status, the anxiety over what people wear or drive, all of it disintegrates into absolute meaninglessness when placed under the magnifying glass of mortality. Death is not an event waiting for us at the end of the road. Death is happening right now. Every day you have lived is a day that belongs to death. Your childhood is dead. Yesterday is dead. The hour that just passed is dead. You cannot get them back. When you learn this truth, everything falls into place because you suddenly gain the power of absolute prioritization. You develop a ruthless filter for what is allowed to consume your energy. You stop preparing for life, and you start actually living it. You stop treating the present moment as a stepping stone to some imaginary future, and you recognize that this moment, right now, is the only destination there is. You become kinder, because you realize everyone you meet is also marching toward the same inevitable end. You become bolder, because you realize that the embarrassment of failure is nothing compared to the tragedy of unlived potential. You stop hoarding your love, your joy, and your ambitions for a tomorrow that is promised to no one. Memento mori teaches you that to fear death is to fundamentally misunderstand life. We should not fear that life will come to an end. We should be absolutely terrified that it might never truly begin. In the ancient labyrinthine streets of Alexandria, beneath the shadow of the great library, lived an elderly master weaver named Elias. His looms produced the most magnificent tapestries in all of Egypt, heavily sought after by kings and nobles. One day, a young, impatient apprentice asked Elias why he spent so much time perfecting a single, dull grey thread hidden in the background of a massive, vibrant mural. The apprentice argued that no one would ever notice it among the brilliant golds and royal purples. Elias stopped his loom, his weathered hands resting on the timber. He guided the boy to the far end of the workshop and told him to look at a completed tapestry hanging on the wall. "Step close," Elias instructed. "What do you see?" The boy pressed his face near the fabric. "I see a chaotic knot of colors, rough edges, a jumble of strings that make no sense." "Now, walk to the doorway and turn around," the old man said. The boy did as he was told. From the doorway, the chaotic jumble vanished. In its place emerged a breathtaking, unified image of a sunrise over the Mediterranean Sea. The shadows, the bright rays, the dark storm clouds, every single thread, including the dull grey ones, worked together in absolute harmony to create the masterpiece. "The grey thread does not know it is part of the sky," Elias said softly. "It only knows its own tension. But if that grey thread snaps, if it refuses to bear its weight because it believes it is unimportant, the entire image unravels. The beauty of the whole depends entirely on the duty of the smallest part. In this quiet wisdom lies the culmination of the Stoic philosophy, uniting the final three profound truths that bring our lives into ultimate alignment: sympatheia, interconnectedness; summum bonum, virtue as the highest good, and the view from above. The fifth truth, sympatheia, is the realization that you are not a solitary, isolated ego, battling against a hostile universe. You are a single, vital thread in the infinite tapestry of humanity. Marcus Aurelius, despite holding the supreme power of the Roman Empire, reminded himself daily that he was merely a citizen of the cosmos. "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee," he wrote. "We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth." Modern society breeds a toxic hyper-individualism. We are taught to view others as competitors, obstacles, or stepping stones. But the Stoic knows that to harm another is to fundamentally harm oneself, for we share the same rational nature. When you internalize sympatheia, the heavy burden of loneliness dissipates. You realize that your acts of kindness, your private endurance, and your silent struggles are not meaningless. They are the tension holding your part of the tapestry together. When you forgive someone, when you choose empathy over vengeance, you are quite literally healing the universe. But how do we ensure our thread remains strong? This leads to the sixth truth. Summum bonum, the belief that virtue is the only true good. We spend our lives chasing external markers of success, wealth, fame, status, and physical beauty. But the Stoics classified all these things as indifferents. They are nice to have, like a warm breeze on a journey, but they are not the destination. They can be taken from you in an instant by a thief, an illness, or a shift in the economy. If your identity is tied to your bank account, what happens when it empties? If your worth is tied to your looks, what happens when time ravages your face? The only thing that can never be stolen, the only possession that is truly yours, is your character. The four Stoic virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, are the highest good. When everything else falls away, your character is what remains standing in the ruins. When you learn this truth, a profound shift occurs. You no longer measure a good day by how much money you made or how much praise you received. You measure it by how you behaved. Did you act with integrity? Were you courageous in the face of fear? Did you treat others with justice? Were you disciplined? If the answer is yes, then you have succeeded, even if the world throws you into a dungeon. You become completely unbreakable because your treasure is locked within an invincible vault. Finally, to sustain this wisdom, amidst the daily chaos of life, the Stoic employs the seventh truth: the view from above. When we are locked in the trenches of our daily routines, every minor inconvenience feels like a catastrophe. A missed deadline, a dent in our car, a rude comment. These things consume our entire field of vision, just like the apprentice pressing his face into the rough knots of the tapestry. The view from above requires you to mentally zoom out. Imagine your consciousness lifting out of your body. You look down at yourself sitting in your room. Then you float higher, looking down at your city, watching millions of people rushing about, consumed by their own dramas, their own heartbreak, their own triumphs. You float higher still, looking down at the entire earth, a pale blue dot suspended in the vast, freezing void of space. From this cosmic vantage point, where are your anxieties? Where is your bruised ego? Where is the humiliation of yesterday's mistake? They are completely invisible. They are less than dust. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced this meditation to cleanse his mind of the petty squabbles of Roman politics. Think of substance in its entirety, of which you have the smallest of shares, and of time in its entirety, of which a brief and momentary span has been assigned to you, and of the works of destiny, and how very small is your part in them. The view from above does not make your life meaningless. It makes your life weightless. It crushes your arrogance, but it also annihilates your anxiety. It is the ultimate breath of fresh air. When you unite these 7 truths, the transformation is complete. You draw the boundary of control, protecting your inner kingdom. You silence the shadows of imagination, planting your feet firmly in objective reality. You embrace your fate, using adversity as the fuel for your fire. You remember your mortality, living every single day with the fierce urgency of a dying man. You recognize your connection to all living things, acting with profound empathy. You cultivate virtue as your sole compass. And when the storms of life inevitably rise, you elevate your mind, taking the view from above, watching the clouds pass calmly beneath you. This is the promise of Stoicism. It is not an escape from reality. It is the ultimate mastery of it. The chaos of the world will never cease. The wind will always blow. The arrow will sometimes miss, and the sea will always harbor storms. But within you lies a citadel that no army can conquer, no tragedy can break, and no time can erode. When you finally stop trying to bend the universe to your will, and instead focus purely on mastering the mind that perceives it, everything, at long last, falls perfectly into place. The Stoic path is not a destination you reach, but a daily practice you choose. It is the steady, quiet work of building an invincible mind. If these ancient truths have sparked a fire within you, if they have helped you see clearly through the fog of modern chaos, do not let this momentum fade. Like this video to support the channel and signal to the algorithm that this wisdom matters. Share it with someone who is fighting a battle you know nothing about. You might just hand them the exact shield they need. And most importantly, subscribe and ring the bell so we can continue building our character together, one truth at a time. The world is out of our control, but our minds are ours. Let's master them.